الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So last time then we got up to line number 29 and line number 30 in Al-Urjuzah Al-Mi'iyah regarding the Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that was where it said ثلاثة هم وثمانون رجل ومعهم جماعة حتى كمل وهن 10 و8 ثم قد أسلم في السادس حمزة الأسد. Those lines, you remember, they were about the hijrah, the 2 hijrahs that were made by the Muslims from Mecca to Habasha, to Abyssinia, to that area. And we talked about those hijrahs, the first one and the second one, and the numbers on each one in the last lesson. And we mentioned about how they heard that the Quraysh had become Muslims, so they came back. But when they arrived back in Mecca, they realized that the news was inaccurate and that they had not become Muslims at all. And so then later on, as it's mentioned, they returned again. All of that we mentioned last time. The next line in the poem talks about Hamza becoming Muslim. But before we get to that, we're going to have a look at the story of Salman al-Farisi becoming a Muslim. Because Al-Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala mentions that story at this stage in the Seerah, and it's a long narration. There is a long hadith, a long story of Salman al-Farisi becoming Muslim. So we'll have a read of that here and go through that story. It's mentioned from Abdullah ibn Abbas. Abdullah ibn Abbas. He said, حدثني سلمان الفارسي من فيه قال. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma said, Salman al-Farisi told me himself. Abdullah ibn Abbas, he says, Salman al-Farisi told me himself the story about how he became Muslim, etc. Abdullah ibn Abbas heard it directly from Salman al-Farisi himself. So Salman, he says, كنت رجلا فارسيا من أهل أصبهان من أهل قرية يقال لها جي، وكان أبي دهقان قريته، وكنت أحب خلق الله إليه، فلم يزل حبه إياي حتى حبسني في بيته كما تحبس الجارية. Salman says, I was a Persian man from the area of Asbahan. From the area of Asbahan, which isn't too far from the areas of Iraq. He said, I was a Persian man from that region, from a village called Jay, from a village called Jay. And he said, my father was the Dihqan, meaning the leader of his village. The father of Salman al-Farisi, Salman says, my father was the chief of the village, and I was the most beloved of creation to him. Meaning he was the most beloved of the people to his father. His father loved him. And he said, the love of my father was such that I was so dear to him, the dearest of the people to him, to the extent that he kept me in the house just as a small girl or a girl is kept in. Meaning he's highlighting how his father loved him so much and how Salman was so dear to his father that his father didn't want him to go and disappear anywhere. He would keep him at home. He mentions the example just like a girl is kept at home. Then Salmani carries on and says, وَاجْتَهَدْتُ, and of course he wasn't Muslim yet in these days. وَاجْتَهَدْتُ فِي الْمَجُوسِيَّةِ. He's basically narrating all of his story, his kind of life story of how he became Muslim. So he mentions he used to be in this village in Asbahan, living with his father. And he says, اجتهدت في المجوسية حتى كنت قطن النار الذي يوقدها لا يتركها تخبو ساعة. He said that I worked hard and I was striving in the Magian religion, the fire worshippers and the likes, that I used to strive upon that way up until the extent that I was made the guardian of the fire, the Magians, the fire worshippers, until I was made the guardian of the fire keeper, the one who tended to the fire, looked after the fire, and never let the fire go out. قال وكانت لأبي ضيعة عظيمة فشغل في بنيان له يوما فقال لي يا بني إني قد شغلت في بنياني هذا اليوم عن ضيعتي فاذهب إليها فاطلعها. He says that my father had a huge garden. My father had a huge garden. And on one occasion, he says my father was preoccupied with his building work. He was doing some building work, construction and the like. He said one day my father was preoccupied with that building work. So he said to me, to Salman, he said to me, go and check on my garden. You go and check on the garden. And he told me some of the things that he wanted me to do. أمرني فيها ببعض ما يريد. ثم قال لي لا تحتبس عني فإنك إن احتبست عني كنت أهم إلي من ضيعتي وشغلتني عن كل شيء من أمري. Salman says that my father then said to me that when you go out towards the garden, then do not delay. Do not delay thereafter in returning, otherwise I will become preoccupied with you and all my focus is going to go on you. So he gave him the instructions to go out there to the garden to check up on it, this garden that his father had. He told Salman, you go and check on it and then come back. Don't stay out, come back. قال, so Salman says, فخرجت أريد ضيعته التي بعثني إليها. He said, I went out towards the garden that my father sent me to. فمررت بكنيسة من كنائس النصارى. He said, on the way, I happened to pass by a church from the churches of the Christians. فسمعت أصواتهم فيها وهم يصلون. He said, I heard their voices inside whilst they were praying, whilst the Christians were doing their prayer. وكنت لا أدري ما أمر الناس لحبس أبي إياي في بيته. And Salman says, I didn't really know about these people or know about what goes on because his father used to keep him in the house all the time. Salman's father used to keep him at home in the house all the time because Salman was so beloved to his father. So Salman didn't have much experience of the outside world. So he said, I didn't know what they were doing. And so he said, فَلَمَّا سَمِعْتُ أَصْوَاتَهُمْ دَخَلْتُ عَلَيْهِمْ أَنْظُرُ مَا يَصْنَعُونَ. He said, when I heard their voices from the church, I decided to go and have a look to see what they are doing. Curiosity. He didn't know about these affairs, didn't have experience. He heard them inside of this church doing some worship. He said, I decided to go and have a look to see what they are doing. فَلَمَّا رَأَيْتُهُمْ أَعْجَبَتْنِي صَلَاتُهُمْ. He said, so when I saw them inside, I was impressed by their worship. I was impressed by their worship and attracted to their way. وَرَغِبْتُ فِي أَمْرِهِمْ. So I was attracted to their way when seeing the Christians. وَقُلْتُ هَذَا وَاللَّهِ خَيْرٌ مِنَ الدِّينِ الَّذِي نَحْنُ عَلَيْهِ. He was a Magian with the fire worshippers. So when he saw the Christians and doing their worship and worshipping Allah as they believed they should be worshipping, but upon their misguidance. But when he saw that, he said, by Allah, this is definitely better than what we're upon. This is definitely better than what we're upon. The fire worshippers, the Magians. He said, Wallahi, هذا والله خير من الدين الذي نحن عليه. This by Allah is better than the religion we're upon. فوالله ما برحتهم حتى غربت الشمس وتركت ضيعة أبي فلم آتها. He said, I ended up staying there up until sunset. I ended up staying there up until sunset with the church, with the Christians. And I never ended up going to the garden even. ثم قلت لهم أين أصلي أو أين أصل هذا الدين أو أين أصل هذا الدين قالوا بالشام. So then Salman, he said to them, أين أصل هذا الدين. He said to those Christians, where is the origin of this religion of yours? Where is the origin of this religion of yours? قالوا بالشام. They told him in the area of Sham, Syria, in that area. فرجعت إلى أبي وقد بعث في طلبي وشغلته عن أمره كله. So now, because Salman was late, his father had sent him on that duty to go to the garden and come back. He ended up passing the church and going in there and staying the whole day, observing and being with them and talking. And so when he finally came back, he realized his father had become worried and sent out a search party and become very worried and preoccupied with what's going on. Where has Salman gone? فَلَمَّا جِئْتُ قَالَ. So when Salman, he says, I finally arrived back home to my father, he said, أَيْ بُنَيَّ أَيْنَ كُنْتَ. My son, where were you? أَلَمْ أَكُنْ أَعَدْتُ إِلَيْكَ مَا أَعَدْتُ. Did I not make that deal with you? Did I not tell you about how to do it? Go to the garden, come back. Did I not explain how it should be done? قال قلت يا أبتي. Salman said, He said, I said to my father, "O my father, مررت بأناس يصلون في كنيسة لهم." I went past some people, they were praying in their church. فأعجبني ما رأيت من دينهم. And I was impressed with what I saw from their religion. فوالله ما زلت عندهم حتى غربت الشمس. And I, by Allah, stayed with them. That's where I was, all the way up until sunset. قال أي بني ليس في ذلك الدين خير. Salman's father then says to him, my son, there is no goodness in that religion. دينك ودين آبائك خير منه. Your religion and the religion of your forefathers is better than that. قال, Salman said, قلت, I said to him, كلا والله إنه لخير من ديننا. Nay, by Allah, it is better than our religion. Salman says that to his father. قال فخافني فجعل في رجلي قيدا ثم حبسني في بيته. So then his father got worried and concerned about Salman. Salman, having seen the church and telling his father their religion is better than ours, then his father became concerned about him and he chained him up at home. He tied shackles or fetters onto his legs, like tied him up and kept him at home. قال وبعثت إلي النصارى فقلت لهم إذا قدم عليكم ركب من الشام فأخبروني. Then what happened is, he says, I sent a message to the Christians, because he was now tied up or shackled up in this way at home, so his father could keep an eye on him, keep him safe there. He managed to get a message to those Christians. And he said to them that if any Christian merchants, traders, come here, then tell me about them. If any Christian merchants or traders come here from Sham, from that Syrian region, then tell me. Why that region? Because they had told him the origin of their religion is from that region. So he said, if any of the Christians from that region pass by here, let me know. He got a message over to them. قال فقدم عليهم ركب من الشام تجار من النصارى. So then that's exactly what happened one day. A group of the Christians from Syria, from that Sham area, businessmen, traders, they came. Christians from that area, they came. فأخبروني بهم. So those Christians got a message to Salman. There are some here. فقلت إذا قضوا حوائجهم وأرادوا الرجعة أو رجعة إلى بلادهم فآذنوني. Salman then got a message back to them telling them when they do their business and they finish up their trade, as they used to in those days, traveling around doing trade and then going back. He said when they do their trade and they finish up and they are going to plan to go back, let me know. Before they head off again, let me know. قال فلما أرادوا الرجعة إلى بلادهم أخبروني بهم. So when those Christians from Sham finished off their business in that area and they were going to go back, the Christians sent a message to Salman that they are going. They're going to go. فألقيت الحديد من رجلي. So Salman says, I managed to get that kind of shackle or chain thing off my legs. ثم خرجت معهم حتى قدمت الشام. And he managed to leave home and he went with them. Went with those traders all the way back to Sham. Went with them all the way back to Syria. فلما قدمنا قلت من أفضل هذا الدين علما قالوا الأسقف في الكنيسة. When he then got to Sham, to Syria, to that area, he said to the people there, who is the most knowledgeable among you? Who is the most knowledgeable Christian? They said to him, the bishop in the church. The bishop in the church. Go to him. قال فجئته فقلت له إني قد رغبت في هذا الدين. Salman says, so I went to him in the church and I said to him that I am inclined to this religion of yours. I am attracted to this religion of yours. وأحببت أن أكون معك. And I would love to be with you, to be upon this religion. وأخدمك في كنيستك. And to serve you in your church. I would wish to be with you and to serve you in your church. وأتعلم منك وأصلي معك. And to seek knowledge from you and to pray and worship with you. So initially you see, from fire worshipping and Magians, he came across Christianity, went with that group of traders all the way back to Sham where Christianity had a stronghold, and he went to the bishop. He said, let me be with you here, I will serve you and I will seek knowledge from you and I will worship with you. قال أدخل. The bishop said to him, enter. فدخلت معه. So Salman says, I entered and I was given that permission to be with him and to stay with him and learn from him and to be his kind of student. فكان رجل سوء. Salman says, after now being his student kind of thing, and being there with him and knowing about him and learning about him and getting to know him, Salman said, basically I discovered كان رجل سوء, that he was an evil man. This bishop, this Christian, he was an evil man. يأمرهم بالصدقة ويرغبهم فيها. The bishop, he used to encourage people to give charity and order them to give charity. Order the Christians to give charity and encourage them to give charity so that they could give it to the poor Christians. فإذا جمعوا له شيئا كنزه لنفسه ولم يعطه المساكين. So when the Christians used to gather the gold and the silver, and they used to come and give it to the bishop thinking he's going to distribute it to the poor, Salman says he never used to distribute it. He used to keep it for himself. He used to keep that gold and silver for himself, and he never used to distribute it to the poor. حتى جمع 7 قلال من ذهب ورق, until he had gathered 7 chests, 7 boxes full of gold and silver. So he had gathered 7 boxes, 7 chests full of gold and silver. قال وأبغضته بغضا شديدا لما رأيته يصنع. Salman says, I ended up hating him after seeing what he does. Encourages them to give charity and gets that charity. They think it's going to go to the poor and he keeps it all stashed up for himself. He said, I hated him when I saw what he does, this evil action. ثم مات. Salman says then eventually one day that bishop died. The bishop died. واجتمعت له النصارى ليدفنوه. And the Christians of that area, they all came together. They didn't know what the bishop was up to, what he'd been doing. They thought he was a righteous man. They all came to do his burial. And when they all came to do his burial, فَقُلْتُ لَهُمْ, Salman said to them, إِنَّ هَذَا كَانَ رَجُلَ سُوءٍ. Salman said to them, this was an evil man. He was an evil man. يَأْمُرُكُمْ بِالصَّدَقَةِ وَيُرَغِّبُكُمْ فِيهَا. He used to command you to give charity, and he used to encourage you to give that charity. فَإِذَا جِئْتُمُوهُ بِهَا كَنَزَهَا لِنَفْسِهِ وَلَمْ يُعْطِ الْمَسَاكِينَ مِنْهَا شَيْءٍ. But when you used to give it to him, when you all used to gather that wealth, the gold, the silver, and you used to come and give it to him, he never used to distribute it. He used to keep it all for himself. He never used to distribute it. He used to keep it all to himself. Never gave it to the poor. قال فقالوا لي وما علمك بذلك وعلمك بذلك. The Christians, obviously surprised, they didn't know about any of this. They said, And how do you know that? How do you know that he did that? How do you know about that? قال, Salman said, فَقُلْتُ لَهُمْ, I said to them, أَنَا أَدُلُّكُمْ عَلَى كَنْزِهِ. Salman said, I'll show you all of his stashed gold and silver. I'll show you everything he used to stash up, all of the charity, all of the gold, all of the silver. I'll show you. He said, أَدُلُّكُمْ عَلَى كَنْزِهِ. قالوا فدلنا. They said, okay, show us, let's see. قال فأريتهم موضعه. Salman said, I took them and showed them. He knew where the bishop used to keep it all. He said, I took them and showed them. They saw everything. فاستخرجوا سبع قلال مملوءة ذهبا وورقا. So they went to that place and they pulled out 7 chests, 7 big boxes full of gold and silver. Just as Salman told them. فَلَمَّا رَأَوْهَا قَالُوا. So when the Christians, they found all of those boxes, those chests, like the treasure boxes, full of gold and silver. So now they knew Salman was telling the truth. That bishop had been taking all of the charity for himself. He had been gathering it all, hoarding it all for himself, had not been giving any of it to the poor, to the masakeen. So when they now knew that, upon their anger and realizing the reality of the bishop, they said, لا ندفنه أبدا. They said, we're not going to bury him. We're not even going to bury him. They hadn't buried him yet. They said, we're not even going to bury him. قال فصلبوه ورموه بالحجارة. They crucified him instead. On a big cross, his body, they went and put the body of the bishop. The bishop was dead already. They went and put his body on the cross, crucified him, and they began throwing stones at him. Crucified him and began throwing stones at him. فصلبوه ورموه بالحجارة وجاءوا برجل آخر فوضعوه مكانه. So then Salman says that they then brought along another man and appointed him in the position of the bishop who had died. That bishop had died, so then now needed a replacement. So they came along with another man, someone they used as the replacement for that bishop. They put him in that position. Salman then says, فَمَا رَأَيْتُ رَجُلًا لَا يُصَلِّي الْخَمْسَ أَرَى أَنَّهُ أَفْضَلَ مِنْهُ. Salman said, I have never seen a man who does not offer the 5 daily prayers, because they are the Muslims. He's talking about outside of the Muslims. I've never seen a man, even though at this time he himself was not yet a Muslim, but he's explaining from the non-Muslims, I've never seen a man better than him. This replacement that they had put in for that bishop who died. Salman said, I've never seen a man better than him. فما رأيت رجلا لا يصلي الخمسة أرى أنه أفضل منه. I've never seen a man who doesn't pray his 5 prayers better than him. وأزهد في الدنيا. That I've never seen a man who turned away from the worldly wealth and luxuries more than him. Never saw a man shun away the worldly wealth and possessions and luxuries and bliss. Never seen a man who turned away from all of those things more than him. Meaning he was a great humble man. وَلَا أَرْغَبَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ. And I had never seen a man who was more invested in the afterlife. Never seen a man who worked harder than him for the afterlife. وَلَا أَدْأَبَ لَيْلًا وَنَهَارًا, or anyone who was striving more than him day and night. Never seen anyone like that, who does not pray the 5 prayers. He put that in there because from the Muslims, of course, he saw plenty who were better than him. Of course, he's a Christian, a kafir. But from the non-Muslims, he's saying, from those who don't pray their 5 prayers, I never saw anybody better than him. And worshipping and day and night and not bothered about the worldly glitter and bliss and luxuries. No one better than him. قال فأحببته حبا لم أحب شيئا قبله مثله. Salman said, so I loved him more than I have ever loved anyone before. I loved him more than I have ever loved anyone before. قال فأقمت معه زمانا. Salman says, so I then stayed with him for some time. ثم حضرته الوفاة. And then he died. That bishop died. فقلت له إني قد كنت معك وأحببتك حبا لم أحبه شيئا قبلك. So when that bishop died, just before he died, when he was on his deathbed, Salman said to him, knowing that he's about to die as well now, this bishop, Salman said to him that indeed I was with you and I loved you more than I have ever loved anything before. وَقَدْ حَضَرَكَ مَا تَرَى مِنْ أَمْرِ اللَّهِ. But now you can see what is about to happen, meaning you're on your deathbed now, Salman was telling him. I've been with you for a long time, Salman was saying to him, and I love you more than I have loved anyone before. But now you see that basically you are on your deathbed now. قال فإلى من توصي بي. Salman then said to him, now who do you advise me to go to after you? Who do you advise me to go to after you then? So remember, at this stage of Salman al-Farisi's life, he's with the Christians. He's left his fire worshipping Bayesian religion. He traveled with them, went to Syria. He's with the Christians now. The first bishop, he hated him because he saw the evil from him. But he was still in that Christian environment. He was still with them. A new bishop came, and this new one was very good from what Salman saw of him. He loved him. And so when this replacement one was dying as well, Salman said to him, who do you advise me to go to after you die then? وَبِمَا تَأْمُرُنِي. And what do you command me to do after you die? قال إي بنيّة والله ما أعلم اليوم أحدا على ما كنت عليه لقد هلك الناس وبدلوا وتركوا أكثر ما كانوا عليه إلا رجلا بالموصل وهو فلان وهو على ما كنت عليه فالحق به. This bishop says to him, by Allah, my son, by Allah, I don't know anybody these days who is upon what I was upon. This bishop, he was upon his Christianity, he was upon his worship, he was abandoning the worldly affairs, he was a worshipper. He says to Salman, I don't know anybody else like me now who is still upon this way of Christianity. People have died and people have changed, this bishop is telling Salman. And many of them have left what they used to be upon. He's telling him this 1400 years ago. They've changed and many of them have left what they were upon. I don't know anybody like me now what I used to do. Illa, except one man in Mosul. One man in Mosul, and he gave him the name He gave him the name. He said, there is a man in Mosul, and that individual, he is still upon what I was upon. So go to him and be with him. So he tells him about this man in Mosul. قال فلما مات وغيب لحقت بصاحب الموصل. So Salman says, when he died and he was buried, I then went to the man in Mosul. And when he arrived there, Salman says, I said to him, يا فلان إن فلانا أوصاني عند موته أن ألحق بك وأخبرني أنك على أمره. Salman says to this man in Mosul now, he's found him. He says, oh, so and so, whatever his name was, that so and so, meaning that bishop, has told me upon his deathbed to come and be with you and to join up with you. He has told me you are upon the same way that he was upon. فَقَالَ لِي أَقِمْ عِنْدِي. So this man said to Salman, okay, stay with me. Stay with me. فَأَقَمْتُ عِنْدَهُ. So Salman says, I stayed with him. فَوَجَدْتُهُ خَيْرَ رَجُلٍ عَلَى أَمْرِ صَاحِبِهِ. He says, I stayed with him and I found him to be even better upon this affair than the first one. فَلَمْ يَلْبَثْ أَنْ مَاتٍ. But then this man died as well. But again, just before he died, Salman said to him, فَلَمَّا حَضَرَتْهُ الْوَفَاةِ قُلْتُ لَهُ يَا فُلَانِ إِنَّ فُلَانًا أَوْصَى بِي إِلَيْكَ وَأَمَرَنِي بِاللُّحُوقِ بِكَ وَقَدْ حَضَرَكَ مِنْ أَمْرِ اللَّهِ مَا تَرَى فَإِلَى مَنْ تُوصِي بِي. Salman then says to him that, oh, so and so, the first bishop, the replacement one, the good one, had advised me to come to you when he was on his deathbed and to join you, but now you see what is happening to you, that you are on your deathbed now. So who do you advise me to go to now? Who do you advise me to go to now? And what do you command me to do? قال يا بني والله ما أعلم رجلا على مثل ما كنا عليه إلا رجلا بنصيبين وهو فلان فالحق به. He says to him, my son, indeed I do not know by Allah anyone who is upon the way that we were upon that Christianity, how they were. No one I know is upon the way that we were upon, other than a man in Nasibin, another area. So and so, he gave him the name, go to him and be with him. Salman says, فَلَمَّا مَاتَ وَغُيِّبَ لَحِقْتُ بِصَاحِبِ نَصِيبِينَ فَأَخْبَرْتُهُ خَبَرِي وَمَا أَمَرَنِي بِهِ صَاحِبَايَ. Salman says, when I got to him, I told him the story, told him about the first bishop, the replacement one who had sent me to so and so in Mosul. I was with him. Then the one in Mosul, when he died, he sent me to you. Salman told him what happened and how he's ended up with him. فَقَالَ أَقِمْ عِنْدِي فَأَقَمْتُ عِنْدَهُ. So then this one now says to Salman, okay, stay with me then. And so Salman stays with him. فَوَجَدْتُهُ عَلَى أَمْرِ صَاحِبَيْهِ فَأَقَمْتُ مَعَ خَيْرِ رَجُلٍ. So Salman says, I found him to be upon the same way as the previous one from Mosul, who was upon the same way as that replacement bishop. They were all upon that same way. فَأَقَمْتُ مَعَ خَيْرِ رَجُلٍ. So he says, I stayed with this man as well. فَوَاللَّهِ مَا لَبِثَ أَن نَزَلَ بِهِ الْمَوْتِ. But then this one, death comes to him as well. فلما حضر قلت له يا فلان إن فلانا كان أوصى بي إلى فلان ثم أوصى بي فلان إلى فلان ثم أوصى بي فلان إليك فإلى من توصي بي وبما تأمرني. So when this one was about to die now in Nasibin, Salman says to him, so and so from Sham had told me to go to the one in Mosul. Then when he died, he told me to come to you. Now when you are dying, who do you tell me to go to next? قال يا بني والله ما أعلم بقي أحد على أمرنا آمرك أن تأتيه إلا رجل بعمورية من أرض الروم فإنه على مثل ما نحن عليه فإن أحببت فأته فإنه على أمرنا. He says to him that by Allah there is nobody left who follows our way that I can tell you to go to. There is nobody that I know left on our way, upon our way, who I can tell you to go to, except a man in Ammuriyah. A man in Ammuriyah. So go to him in the land of Ar-Rum, the Romans of that time. فَإِنَّهُ عَلَى مِثْلِ مَا نَحْنُ عَلَيْهِ. He is upon what we are upon. So if you wish, go to him and he is on our way. فَلَمَّا مَاتَ وَغُيِّبَ لَحِقْتُ بِصَاحِبِ عَمُّورِيَّةٍ. So the same happens again when this one dies. Salman then goes to the one in Ammuriyah. فأخبرته خبري فقال أقم عندي فأقمت عند خير رجل على هدي أصحابه. So then when he tells that one, Salman tells that one the full story from Sham to Mosul to Nasibin to Ammuriyah, tells him all the story. The man says, okay, stay with me. And so Salman stays with him, and indeed this man is upon the same methodology and the way of those previous ones. He says, قال واكتسبت حتى كانت لي بقرات وغنيمة. He said, I stayed with him. Salman now settled here with this one now. He said, I stayed with him, and he was obviously also working or whatever he was doing. He said, I ended up with quite a few cows and sheep. I ended up with some wealth when he was staying with this one in Ammuriyah. Ended up with some cows and some sheep and some wealth. قال ثم نزل به أمر الله. Same again. Then this individual in Ammuriyah, he also dies. And upon his deathbed, Salman says the same to him about the story of so-and-so, told me to go to so-and-so when he was dying. He told me to go to so-and-so. Goes through all of that chain again until I arrived at you, and now you're dying. Who do you tell me to go to now? قال إي بني والله ما أعلم أصبح أحد على مثل ما كنا عليه من الناس آمرك أن تأتي ولكنه قد أضل زمان نبي مبعوث بدين إبراهيم يخرج بأرض العرب مهاجره إلى أرض بين حرتين بينهما نخل به علامات لا تخفى يأكل الهدية ولا يأكل صدقة بين كتفيه خاتم النبوة فإن استطعت أن تلحق بتلك البلاد فافعل. Now this is the interesting section here. He says to him now, my son, I do not know anybody who follows our way that I can advise you to go to. Just like all the others said. But then in the end they had told him of one person you can go to. But this one then says to him, I don't know anybody who is upon our way, but there has come the time of a prophet. The time that we are in now, a prophet will come. A prophet will come. The Jews and the Christians, they knew of the coming of the prophet, as we mentioned earlier in the lessons. They knew in their books, in the Torah, in the Injil, a prophet is going to come. He says to him, there's nobody I can tell you to go to, but in this time period now, a prophet is going to come, who will be sent with the religion of Ibrahim. And he will appear in the land of the Arabs. Because right now he was in Ammuriyah towards the Roman areas and over there, far away from the Arabian Peninsula. He tells him in the land of the Arabs, a prophet will appear. And he will migrate to the land between the two Harras, the lave fields with the land of the black rocks. And there will be palm trees in between, or there will be palm trees there. He will have characteristics that will not be hidden. He will eat from the gifts that he is given, but he will not eat from the charity that he is given. And between his shoulders will be the seal of the prophethood. If you can go to that land, then do so. That's what this last one tells him. So then it mentions قال ثم مات وغيب ومكثت بعمورية ما شاء الله أن أمكث. So then this individual, this kind of bishop, also dies, and they bury him, and Salman remains there. He remains in that land, remains in Ammuriyah, because this final bishop hadn't actually told him to go to anyone specific yet. He had given him some general descriptions and instructions. There's going to be a prophet, he's going to be in so and so land. So he didn't have an exact instruction to go to a person and a name of a person. It was more general instructions yet, and he had been told, if you can't make it there, then go there. ثم مر بي نفر من كلب تجار. Then Salman says that it just happened that some merchants were passing by the land where he was in, from the merchants of Kalb, of the tribes, etc., the areas. فَقُلْتُ لَهُمْ, so I said to them, احملوني إلى أرض العرب وأعطيكم بقراتي هذه بقراتي هذه وغنيمتي هذه. Salman said to them, when he discovered they are from those lands of the Arabs, he said to them, take me to the land of the Arabs and I will give you these cows and sheep of mine. Remember, he had been living in that area now for a while. He'd earned some cows and sheep and he had some wealth. He said to them, take me to that land and I'll pay you with these cows and sheep, take them all. قالوا نعم, they said okay. فأعطيتهموها وحملوني معهم. So I gave them the cows and the sheep and they took me with them. حتى إذا بلغوا وادي القرى ظلموني. But then what happened? They did the deal, they took the cows and the sheep from him, and they said, okay, we'll take you with us on our caravan. They used to travel in big caravans, caravan meaning horses and camels and other things, and a big group of them. They said, okay, come in our group, we'll take you. They took him, and when they got to, it's known as the Valley of Al-Qura, when they arrived at this area, they oppressed him. They wronged him. What they did was, باعوني من رجل يهودي عبدا. When they got there, they ended up selling him as a slave. They kind of imprisoned him. And they sold him to someone. They said, he's our slave, pay us, we'll give him to you. And they sold him to a Jewish man. They sold him to a Jewish man as though he was a slave of theirs. Obviously he wasn't, but they wronged him, overwhelmed him as though he's a slave, took the money and said, okay, he's yours. Sold him to that Jewish man as a slave. فَكُنْتُ عِنْدَهُ. So Salman says, I was with this Jewish man now. فَرَأَيْتُ وَرَأَيْتُ النَّخَلَ. He said the Jewish man now was taking him. Salman was now the property of this Jewish man. He's now his slave. He said the Jewish man was taking me with his caravan, whatever it was as well. And they came across palm trees. So Salman said, فَرَجَوْتُ أَنْ يَكُونَ الْبَلَدِ الَّذِي وُصِفَ لِي أو وَصَفَ لِي صَاحِبِي. He said, I was hoping that this is the land that the last bishop had described to him. He said, I was hoping this is maybe it. He had told him about the palm trees in that area. وَلَمْ يَحِقَّ فِي نَفْسِي. He said that I hoped that this was the land that my companion had told me about, but I wasn't certain. I wasn't sure, but the palm trees were there. I was hoping that maybe this is it. فبين أنا عنده إذ قدم علي ابن عم له من بني قريظة من المدينة. So now they're in this land, doesn't know where he is, Salman, with this Jewish man. He's a slave to this Jewish man. The first cousin of this Jewish man comes along, who was from Bani Qurayza, the tribe of Bani Qurayza, who were from Medina. That tribe, those people, they were from Medina. He says a cousin of this Jewish man, his master, came and he was from Medina. فَابْتَاعَنِي مِنْهُ. And that cousin of this Jewish man bought me. He paid his cousin and bought me. So now he's become a slave of this Jewish man who is from Medina. Now he's become a slave of that Jewish man who is from Medina. فَاحْتَمَلَنِي إِلَى الْمَدِينَةِ. So then that one took him to back home to Medina, back home to where he lived, to Medina. He's bought this as a slave. It's his slave now, taking him home to use him there in Medina. فَوَاللَّهِ مَا هُوَ إِلَّا أَنْ رَأَيْتُهَا فَعَرَفْتُهَا بِصِفَةِ صَاحِبِي لَهَا فَأَقَمْتُ بِهَا. Salman says, as soon as I saw the palm trees, he said, by Allah, straight away I recognized it. This is it. He recognized the descriptions that last bishop had given him, recognized the palm trees in the way that it was explained to him. He said, I knew this was it. This is that land. And he said, I stayed there. وَبُعِثَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. And the messenger was sent. فَأَقَامَ بِمَكَّةَ مَا أَقَامَ. But when the messenger was sent, he was sent in Mecca. Salman was now in Medina. So the messenger now became a prophet in Mecca. So in the timeline of things, we've now arrived at 10 years before the Hijrah. So all of that story was going on earlier in history, before the Prophet became a prophet. When the Prophet became a prophet, Salman, in his life, in his biography, he had now reached Medina. So he said, I was there and the Prophet arose in Mecca. And he stayed the years that he stayed in Mecca, the Prophet. وَلَا أَسْمَعُ لَهُ بِذِكْرٍ مِمَّا أَنَا فِيهِ مِنْ شُغَلِ الرَّقِّ ثُمَّ هَاجَرَ إِلَى الْمَدِينَةِ. He said that the messenger stayed, of course, in Mecca as long as he stayed. And he said that I never really used to hear much about him though. Because Salman right now was still a slave. He's busy doing his work and he's a slave. Nobody's telling him anything. He's a slave. He's doing the jobs that he's being told to do. He said, I never used to hear much. I never used to hear much about the Prophet, but he was there in Mecca until eventually 13 years went by and the Prophet arrived in Medina. And Salman has been in Medina all that time. فوالله إني لفي رأس عذق لسيدي أعمل فيه بعض العمل. He said, I at that time was at the top of a palm tree belonging to my master, doing some work on it, and my master was sitting there. وسيدي جالس تحتي إذ أقبل ابن عم له حتى وقف عليه. So his master, who was the cousin of his first master, who had purchased him from those individuals, he was sitting there. His master was sitting there at the bottom of the palm tree. And Salman was at the top doing some job he'd been told to do. And he says, the cousin of my current master, some other cousin, comes along at the bottom of the palm tree and he says, Ya Fulan, قاتل الله بني قيلة والله إنهم لمجتمعون الآن بقبى على رجل قدم من مكة اليوم يزعمون أنه نبي. His cousin comes to him and he says, may Allah kill Banu Qayla, the cousin of the master of Salman. Salman is hearing all of this from the top. He's at the top of the palm tree. He sees his master. He sees the cousin of his master come. The cousin says to his master, by Allah, or may Allah kill Banu Qayla. They are right now gathering in Quba to welcome a man who has come from Mecca today, and they say he is a prophet. Salman says, قال فلما سمعتها أخذتني الرعدة. Salman said, when I heard that, I began to shiver. I began to shiver. He was at the top of the palm tree, and he's hearing now, a man has come from Mecca and they are gathering, Banu Qayla are gathering to welcome him there. And he claims he's a prophet. Salman knew exactly what was going on. The last bishop had told him the story. He knew this is that final messenger, that final prophet now. He said, I began shaking. Because remember, that story had been told to him. Now if you look in the timeline, it's been years, at least 13 years he's been in Mecca. So maybe, who knows, 15 years, however many years he's heard that story. And now after all those years, he hears a man has come. He says he's a prophet. He knew that's it. From that story he'd heard, he said, I began shaking. At the top of the palm tree he was, to the extent he said, ظَنَنْتُ أَنِّي سَاقِطٌ عَلَى سَيِّدِي. He said, I thought I might end up falling down on top of his master who was sitting at the bottom of the tree. He said, I was shaking. I thought I might fall down on top of my master, fall from the tree, when he heard about the prophet. It's him, he's coming to Quba right now. فنزلت عن النخلة فجعلت أقول لابن عمه ماذا تقول. He said, so Salman says, I got down from the palm tree and I started talking to the cousin of my master, asking him, what's going on? What is he saying? What's happening? قال فغضب سيدي. The master got angry at Salman. He got angry. فلكمني لكمة شديدة. He said he got angry and he struck me with his fist. Struck me with his fist and said, ما لك ولهذا. He said, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is my cousin, none of your business. Get to work. Why are you here talking and conversing? What are you doing? ما لك. أقبل على عملك. أقبل على عملك. Go do your work. Because he is talking to his cousin. This is the slave man. Slave man now comes down and gets involved in the conversation. What's going on? Who's the man? What is he saying? He turns to him and says, what are you doing? None of your business. You go on with your work. Why are you here talking, conversing? You're the slave. Get out. Go do your work. That's what he says to him, and he struck him. He says, the master struck me and said, get out. Go do your work. قال فقلت لا شيء إنما أردت أن أستثبته عما قال. Salman said, no, it's nothing. It's nothing. I just wanted to confirm what he was saying. I just wanted to confirm what he was saying. So then what happens next? We'll have to find out next week. Because inshallah ta'ala, we'll have to continue next week. I thought we were going to finish it all, but it is very, very long. And we're going to rush it if I try and finish it now. We'll finish off the last part of it next week, when he actually then goes and meets the Prophet, etc. But now you've got that full biography and that full background of Salman al-Farisi and how it all happened up to this stage. We're now at the stage he's been in Medina for 13 years. And finally this news comes that a prophet is here in Quba. And he was at the top of the palm tree at the time. So that is where we have arrived. We'll carry on from that part of the story from next week, insha'Allah ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi.